Hey guys, Terry Hay here again in the shock treatment workshop. Today we're looking at an Africa Twin. Now, the Africa Twin is a really lovely bike, and it's been very popular with adventure bike riders, easy highway cruising, and has got capabilities off-road to extend beyond most. Now, one of the problems, and it's a known problem with the Africa Twin, is that they suffer from excessive tube wear. Okay, now early on in the piece, a lot of people were complaining that the tubes were wearing out, and basically they would go through fork seals and they weren't getting the fork performance that they're chasing or that they expected from that bike. Now, friction plays such a big part in what we do. You know, like for us, for suspension tuners, we're basically only dealing with three forces: spring forces, damping forces, and frictional forces. Anytime we have an excess of friction, that can create extra harshness or extra damping effect, if you like, but that damping effect is far less controlled than what you get from actual damping systems. And so basically with the Africa Twin, the reason that it was wearing the fork tubes was because of a very poor bushing design on the inner tube. And so with the upside down forks, particularly on dirt bikes, this lower tube actually bends as you hit a bump. So every time you have an impact, I mean, basically the forces from that impact, they want to not only compress the fork, but they're also trying to break them in half. And so what we find is that tube is flexing at that lower triple clamp region. Now here I have a fork tube out of a Honda CRF 450, and basically with this tube you won't be able to see it, but it has a very fine taper on this bushland. And what I've done here is I've actually put a purple mark here so that you can see basically the flat area of that tube, okay, and the rest of it basically tapers away. Now the reason that they do that, the reason they put those tapers in there, is so that as the fork is compressing, where the triple clamp is grabbing the outer tube, it'll want to bend at that point. So they put a little flex in here so that the bushing itself doesn't present its entire width, and it can actually get around that bend a lot easier. Now with road bikes, I don't normally have to do that because the chrome tube or the bush on the chrome tube is already positioned above the lower triple clamp region. So most road bikes have got, say, 110, 120 millimeters of fork travel. But with the Africa Twin, what we have is a typical road bike bush design, but this fork, because of the extended travel in this fork, this chrome tube will actually go through that triple clamp region. And so we still need that flex that's in the bushing. Now, this is one of the latest fork tubes from the Africa Twin, and in the earlier ones they just had standard anodizing on the outside. So typical Showa, they had that champagne gold sort of finish. And what they did to alleviate all the complaints that they were getting about the tubes wearing was they actually had them Kashima coated. Now Kashima coating is a more durable finish. It's not quite as good as some of the industrial hard anodizings, but still very good. And so basically what they did was they addressed the symptom, not the cause. Okay, and so the cause has been this particular design here. Now, if we have a look at the bushings I've taken out of the CRF 450, basically what we can see is that the wear is quite different. You can see obviously where that flat spot is, and we're not seeing outer bushing wear because it's actually flexing. And so when we look at the bushing that we've taken out of the Africa Twin, it's not wearing in the middle, but you can see it's wearing on the outsides, and that's because that's the area of the bush that's taking all the pressure. And so this is creating not only wear, but it's also creating binding in the fork action. And so when we're hitting a bump now, this fork is harsher than what it should be. Okay, and unlike Honda, we want to address the problems where they lay. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to take these tubes, we're going to put them in the lathe, and I'm actually going to machine a taper on this bushland. And when we do that, not only will we dramatically reduce the wear that's going to occur within this fork, but we'll actually make the ride a lot smoother. And so when we reduce the friction at this area, the effect is so large that we actually have to go into the cartridge and we'll pull the cartridge apart. We'll have to reconfigure the damping because we're taking that much force out of the system now. So when we look at a fork, I mean, obviously the force that we feel is a combination of spring force, damping forces and friction. And so if we need a total force component, and I'm just going to throw a figure out there, let's say we need a total force component of 100 to match the demand that we're putting on there. We might be getting 40 from spring force, we might be getting 40 from damping force, we might be getting 20 from friction. In this case, we're probably getting 40 from friction and 20 from damping. And so when we reduce our damping force, if we reduce this by half, our friction force, if we reduce this by half and we take our friction down to 20, we're now going to have to boost our damping up to get the same force component that we require to match our demand. And so we'll machine this, we'll reconfigure the damping that's in this tube, and I would love to be able to show you the wear spot that's in here. We'll have a look at it, but I don't think you'll be able to see it. I don't think the camera will focus on it. But basically, we've got a wear patch in there that is approximately 40 millimeters wide and 30 millimeters deep. And so the Kashima didn't work. It probably gave us a few extra Ks before we actually wore through, but it still wore through. So what we can do is we can either have these tubes recoated and do our bushland mod, and we'll never have a problem with this again. Or, you know, if we look at it, this wear will only occur on one side of the tube. So for now, what we can do is we can actually put a little ID mark on one side of this tube, and when we install it back in the bike, we can simply rotate it 180 degrees, and that bushing will be working on fresh material. So if you don't want to recoat, that's a very simple solution that will cost you nothing. You know, so our modification for this, basically, just with the machine time, generally works out about $100 to $120. So it's not an expensive mod, far cheaper than buying tubes. So yeah, we'll get into this, and we'll come back to you and we'll show you what we've done. Okay, some knucklehead complained about having dogs in the video last take that we did. Love my dogs, and they are in the workshop all the time. And so these guys are just an awesome part of our lives. And if you don't like it, mate, go and watch another video. Okay, we're about to start machining. We're actually going to machine up a central plug that we'll be able to plug the tube into and machine our bushland with. But on the other end, we're going to engage a live sensor into the base of the fork. And before we do anything, what we want to do is actually make sure that the hole in the bottom of the tube is basically in line with the tube itself. Now, quite often these castings, even though they're machined, they don't actually come out perfectly central with the tube. And so we'll dial this up, and if it's very, very close, what we'll do is we'll just simply engage it on the live center. If it's not close, what we will do is we'll actually use our cutter, and we will put a little taper on the inside of that. We know that's then going to be perfectly central to the tube, and we're good to go. Okay, so we've sorted out the base end. We've got that nice and plumb. And now what we want to do is, rather than clamp on the end of this tube, if we clamp on this in the jaws, what will happen is we'll actually distort it, and it will mess with our perfectly concentric bushland. And so what I do is I mount up a piece of acetal or Delrin, and we've actually machined this both across the face and down the depth to basically give us a resistance fit. So we will literally be able to plug this on. It's fairly snug, but we can plug that on, and then we'll engage our tailstock, and that will hold everything perfectly central, and we'll be able to get the best machining on our bushland. Okay, so we're all set. We've set our bed up to 1 degree taper, and that's all it needs to be. It's a very, very fine taper, and it's amazing how big a difference that will make. We're going to engage a tool to basically cut about 5 to 6 millimeters of taper onto this bushland area, leaving us around 8 millimeters of flat area in the center. And fortunately for us, they've got a groove on the end of the bushland, so it gives us a nice tool finish point. Okay, so we've machined our taper. It's 8 millimeters wide. What we'll do now is we'll actually clean up these just a little bit with a bit of paper, and that'll give us a great result. On to the next tube. So here we are, we've got the bike back together. Peter is the proud owner of this machine, and we've walked him through every change that we've made. We've shown him what was going on with these forks, the wear patches, the efforts that we've made to correct all that. We've got the bike back together, and we know we're going to get a very different ride quality now that we've removed a lot of the friction from the system. And so I'll ride it first, and I'll dial this bike in so we've got it steering and managing bumps and braking the way that we want it to. Then we'll get Peter on the bike and he'll ride it, and then we'll actually adjust to suit his own riding preference. Okay, so Pete's back from his ride. How'd you get on?
It's impressive.
Impressive. Excellent.
I didn't think there'd be that much difference and improvement to what it was, and it's at another level. Well done.
Excellent. Right. Well, nice to meet you, and lovely to have your bike in here, and happy riding.
Happy customer. Good on you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.